As anyone will tell you, being the butt end of so many jokes can only go so far before a person or group of people will inevitably decide to take action. And when you're a car company as well known and respected as Toyota, you don't take slander like that very lightly, especially when it revolves around one of your signature longest running hybrid vehicles. So what did they do? They went back to the drawing board and came back out swinging harder than ever with one of the most futuristic and unexpected surprises that anyone ever saw coming. And now this little joke is no longer a laughing matter. You know, you'd think that would be my typical reaction getting to know yet another variant of the Toyota Prius. A car that has been joked about by everybody from Jeff Dunham down to pretty much anyone who's even remotely not a fan of hybrid vehicles. And when I first heard that Toyota was taking the wraps off a completely redesigned and reimagined version of the Prius, I didn't have too high of an expectation of it. But now after getting to know this one, just a plain hybrid variant for a few days, I am not singing the same song as before. Now some of you guys may remember, only last year I was driving a brand new Prius Prime for a solid week straight. And I thought that there was something there, that there was maybe something to be desired with that car, despite the fact that in the end it was butt ugly from so many angles. But now, there is nothing remotely to be desired, nor is there anything ugly about this new model. To start with, this thing makes almost 200 horsepower. Just as a hybrid, forget the plug-in variant, which makes 220 horsepower, this is more than adequate when it comes to giving you a little more zip in such a small car. But let's not forget the aim of the Prius is to make sure your wallet stays happy too, which it will. This hybrid-only model with its new 2-liter 4-cylinder and all of its hybrid goodies underneath gets 52 miles to the gallon combined. And that will definitely put a smile on a lot of people's faces. Now, I will say, however, that underneath all of this, despite the fact that, yes, it has a good bit more power than before, there is one thing that lets down every single hybrid on the road, or at least the majority of them. I know there have been some exceptions over the years, but it's the transmission. I mean, I know the CVT is there for fuel economy and it's not really designed for power, but once you start taking the power meter on this car more into the power band, it just kind of falls flat on its face. I mean, I'm not expecting this thing to go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, but you know, off the line, you gotta give it a little bit of a poke and it's like, oh, hey, maybe there is something a little extra there. But then if you really wanted to hammer on it, say to pass somebody, it's going to take a little while to get there. Okay then. Yeah, she's got some pep in her step. Although I don't really much appreciate just hearing nothing but a flatline buzz coming from under the hood. But I think the best attribute of the Prius is that it's the perfect companion for someone who lives in an area like Houston. Maybe you live downtown and, you know, maybe you live in a high-rise apartment with a tight little parking garage with these narrow spaces, or maybe you've got, you know, a condo where you park outside on the street in a parking spot that looks small enough for, well, basically a bicycle. You know, having a car like this in that type of area is exactly what it's meant for. And it's nimble. It can take on tight city streets with any kind of gusto. Okay, it's not a sports car, but at speed, the steering actually weights up pretty nicely. It's a little soft, you know, off-center, but feels a little more dynamic to drive. It feels like it's got a little something extra to give than just the extra horsepower that I mentioned earlier. So it's definitely gotten a lot better, and it definitely feels a lot more comfortable. I feel like I could do tons of miles in this car and not ever get tired. I have all the creature comforts I could want. It's decently quiet, as I said. I mean, it's not the quietest thing I've ever heard. You know, you still can hear almost every car around you. But driving this is like, it's like being around somebody who listens to classical music all the time. They're kind of soft, relaxed, kind of soft-spoken, don't really care about too much. And then you put them in a car like this, and you take out their classic music and pop in a Daft Punk EDM track. All of a sudden, their attitude is going to go, whoa, what's this? This isn't my soft-spoken classicalness. Well, you know what? It's still a classic. It just has a lot more to offer. Now, while some would say that the Prius's performance is now much more adequate for a compact hybrid like this, I will say that the design is anything but, because this car looks so futuristic. I'm surprised somebody didn't have a time machine to go forward to create a design like this here in 2023. Only somebody like Toyota would go to such lengths to make this car look as cutting edge as possible. And speaking of cutting edge, what a more apt name for the color, the cutting edge silver. Bright, bold, beautiful metallic, and it suits this car absolutely perfectly, where it's not drawing too much attention to itself. But speaking of drawing attention, this doesn't look like any other Prius that's ever come before, even though it does have the same kind of sloping windshield and the rounded egg-like roof and the more cut-off rear end. But if you come in and look at the details, look at the headlights, for example. They just don't look like any other car I've ever seen. They're all LED, these massive LED turn signals around the top, LED main beams. Of course, you got things like auto high beam assist thrown in as well. You've got a couple of other little bits of tech, like the intuitive park assist that goes across the front. But hidden up here, there's a little camera hidden here in the front, because this car has the addition of the limited premium package, which gives you the addition of the panoramic around view monitor. And at about a tenth over 181 inches long, the new Prius is only about an inch bigger compared to the outgoing model. Now, they say every inch counts, but when you're talking about size, this car is still very much on the small side. In fact, it's a little under an inch and a half shorter than a new Toyota Corolla. So you are getting a sense of the size we're working with here. But if you're going to talk size, and possibly my biggest praise I can give to this car's exterior outside of its futuristic styling, it is the wheels. Would you believe they've put 19-inch wheels on a Prius? I never thought I'd see the day when they put something that not only looks this good, but also is this big on an economy car. They're wrapped in 195 50 series Toyo tires, and I am loving the dark finish with the polished face. Just absolutely perfect for a futuristic car like this. And if you're somehow thinking that spending almost $40,000 on a Prius doesn't get you much in the way of features, that is not correct, my friend, because you look at things like the mirrors. Okay, they're metallic black on top. That's kind of cool. They have blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert, and that's pretty much expected on a car of this price point. But they also have a camera underneath each mirror, as I said, a part of that limited premium package's panoramic monitor. But of course, my favorite feature, or at least one of them, is the glass roof. I love how the black contrasts perfectly with the silver. There are separate sunshades underneath here to allow light not only into the front part of the cabin, but also in the rear as well. But as you would expect with any Prius, you also get an advanced keyless access system. And Toyota finally listened to me by, instead of just putting everything on the front and nothing on the back, they actually put the name on the back of this thing. I freaking love it. Now you've got lock, unlock, you've got the power trunk in this case, which you'll see in a bit. You've got panic and the releasable key blade that comes out of the bottom. But perhaps my favorite thing about this system, even more than the fact they put the name on the back of the key, is the fact that when you unlock it using the standard touch points on the door handles, it makes the most unique sound you've ever heard. Now, while the front of most recent Priuses has looked like something out of a Star Wars movie, as for the rear, I couldn't exactly say the same until now. Toyota, yet again, knocked it out of the park with this one. Still maintaining some of the Prius's usual traits, like a big back window. This one has the gloss black to kind of break up the silver a little bit more. Love that nice little touch. You now have this huge LED light bar that goes all the way across the back with your LED taillights on the outside, your LED turn signals, reversing lights, and so on. I love the fact they've spelled out Prius here in this very futuristic font. And one one thing that kind of confused me is I thought I was looking at a Ford badge here with this LTD. That's only a joke, because that is what the limited namesake has now been condensed down to. You also now have a new hybrid electric vehicle badge, and to finish off all of the technology going on down here, you not only have the intuitive park assist across the bottom of the bumper, but as an extra option on this one, not only do you have a standard backup camera, but this one has the addition of a digital rear view mirror, thus requiring an additional lens here on the tailgate. As much as it seems Toyota has given you absolutely everything from what we've seen so far, there is one area of this vehicle that still gives you less than you might think. Believe it or not, it's in the trunk. Now you could pull the latch to open the hatchback, or you could use the key in this case. There is no hands-free access despite this being the limited model. And once you open that rather large hatch, you're looking at about 7 cubic feet of space less at just under 21 cubic feet total than you got in the previous generation, which I think is quite surprising. Toyota has changed absolutely everything about this car, and yet you get less space in the back than you did in the old model. Now, it's around the same case if you fold down the back seats. You get around 51 cubic feet with those down, so plenty of space to store everything, but still, they change everything about the car, and yet they don't give you as much room to store your stuff when it comes down to it. Now, you would think with having an exterior that looks like something out of 2035, that Toyota would have just stopped there and said, okay, we've changed the exterior design. It looks way better than it did before. There's your all-new Prius. They went way beyond skin deep with this car, because you take one look at the new Prius's interior and you suddenly realize that Toyota spared no expense in renovating this entire car inside and out. There is one problem that I have with this particular example, however, which is that they've given it the black interior. Now, I have no problem with black interiors in general. I think they can be fantastic in certain applications. This one, though, is a little bit monochromatic, a bit monotone for me. I just wish there was a lot more contrast going on in here. And the only things I can see to sort of catch the eye in this sea of blackness is the two-tone gray and black going on here on the door, which I wish they'd kind of translated to maybe the dash. It would have looked a little more inviting, I guess, to me. The only other things I see are the ambient lighting going across the dash. Nice touch. But underneath that, there's this like faux carbon fiberish plastic trim. Not really to my taste. It kind of takes away from this limited status that this car has. But everything else in the limited model specifically is exactly what you'd expect. Soft text bound seats, which are stupid comfortable. They're heated, cooled for the front occupants. The driver's seat is a memory. It's everything you could ask for. But then once you actually sit in the driver's seat, this is where my other two gripes come into play about this car. The first of which is the steering wheel. It's not that it's too small, because it's the perfect size for a car like this. It's not even the fact that it has a leather rim, or even that it's heated. I love both of those things. It's the placement of the buttons. And this is the same problem I had with both the Subaru Solterra and Toyota BZ4X EV twins. Normally in most cars, or pretty much any other car that I've driven, the buttons are stacked horizontally, but in this, they've stacked them vertically. And I honestly thought I was getting into the Starship Enterprise on wheels here, because there's just so many of them. But once you start looking, you're like, okay, I have the aero pad and adjustments for my new digital gauge cluster, Bluetooth, volume, voice recognition, the usual radio controls, and then of course the ubiquitous Toyota Safety Sense collection. But within that Safety Sense array here on the wheel, there is one button that caught me by surprise, which is one that looks like a regular cruise control button, but it says mode underneath it. That is there because Toyota actually allows this car to switch between using the radar cruise and just being in a regular cruise control state. However, once you get past the wheel and its unusual array of buttons, this is the other problem I have. You have that brand new digital gauge cluster up there, but in my optimal driving position with the steering wheel right at arm's length and just everything exactly the way I want it, the top of the wheel covers up the entire bottom of that gauge cluster. Now, I could of course look up and see, okay, there's my odometer, there's my range to empty, there's all the icons for the different Safety Sense functions, but you know, whether or not I want to read that, that's kind of a personal decision. But if I really wanted to see everything up there, I could just drop the steering column into my lap and just be uncomfortable everywhere I drive. And while having a new digital gauge cluster is one thing, Toyota certainly spared no expense when it came to improving the infotainment and entertainment values of the new Prius. You might remember in the last one I drove, which happened to be a Prius Prime, it had this giant vertically stacked screen that looked like something shrunken out of a Tesla, but it was filled with tech that was way too far dated despite being a much newer model year. In this, not so. This being the Limited, we have a 12.3-inch screen that's standard, and it has everything you could want. The newest highlights connectivity system with navigation, wireless Android Auto, wireless CarPlay. You even have your own personal assistant built into the system as well, not to mention that premium package, which adds that panoramic monitor that I mentioned earlier. But above all else, the one thing that plays to my tune specifically, no pun intended, is the factory 8-speaker JBL audio system, also standard on the Limited model. Now, I've tested a lot of Toyota and JBL collaborations over the years, but this one, I'd say it's still pretty solid. And aside from the screen, the party tricks don't stop there either, because for the near $1,100 that it costs to get the Limited premium package on this example here, you not only get that panoramic monitor, but you also get something called Advanced Park. This is a system that's pretty much identical to the one that's found in some of the Lexus cars that I've driven before, specifically the new Lexus NX. Some of you guys may remember seeing me testing the Advanced Park system on that car in a completely separate video. This system, it's exactly the same way. You find a parking spot via the system, you tell it whether you want to nose in or back in, and then you let the car do the rest. It'll change gears, it'll steer, it'll brake, it'll hit the gas, it'll do everything for you. Once you get away from the goodies, however, again, the monotony kind of continues in a pretty decently styled fashion. You have a single zone climate control with your functions for heated, cooled seats and all that good stuff. You have 2 USB-Cs down in the lower area here, one for charging, one for possibly connecting a phone to the USB to play music or Android Auto or something like that. You also have a removable storage compartment down here just in front of your cup holders, which I found rather amusing. And in this, you still kind of get the little stubby shifter, but instead of it being up on the dash like the old one, it's now down here in the middle, and it works exactly like, I don't know, a Lexus LC500 or an LS500 or something like that. Still has all the same functions minus the manual mode, which has been replaced by engine braking. But everything else, electronic parking brake, EV mode, auto brake hold, drive mode select, it's all there. But the coolest part I found is the positioning of the wireless charger. Normally you'd think, okay, it might be up here, it might be hidden in the center somewhere. Nope, it's actually right here in the middle. Now, I know what you're thinking at this point. If there's so much room up in the front for the driver and passenger, there's no way there could be enough room for someone taller like myself at over 6 feet to fit in the back of a small car like the Prius. Well, you know what? You actually can. For starters, there's a lot more room back here for my head than I thought, because the headliner is actually indented. And with the driver's seat being in the position I would have it as a driver myself, I've got probably an inch, maybe an inch and a half between my knees and the back of the seat. Speaking of the back of the seats, however, if you're in the outboard rear seats in this Limited model, you've got heated rear seats for that. Your middle passenger, unfortunately, they're kind of SOL, but that's usually been the case anyway. You've got 2 USB-C chargers down at the base of the console as well, and even better than all of that, I've got my own separate sunshade back here as well, so that I can see pretty much the same thing that the driver and passenger would see, even though I thought sunroofs were only reserved for driver and passenger, not the people sitting here in the back. Also, if you're sitting here in the back and perhaps you're a bit parched, your middle armrest will actually come down and not only provide a nice little bit of comfort should you not have, say, a nice drink with you as well, but the cup holders are big enough that if you got your big bottle of alkaline water, that'll fit nice and tight in there as well. And on that note, boys and girls, this now wraps up our review and drive of the all-new 2023 Toyota Prius. You know, as much as I was ready to give this thing so much grief like every other Prius that I've ever driven before, I just can't. I've loved everything about this car, from the way it looks with its spaceship-like styling to the fact it's still very economical. And yes, I know I've picked holes in a couple of parts about it, but as an overall package, this is a Prius I would actually be proud to drive. But anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, perhaps you learned something about the brand new Prius today, give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit the subscribe button down below, because trust me, opportunities like this don't present themselves very often, and it would not be possible without subscribers and viewers like yourselves and partnerships like Toyota USA. But in the end, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.